Nobody expected it. Not the timing, not the words, not the admission from one of the most private and fiercely competitive veterans in the league. But after everything that happened between the Phoenix Mercury and the Indiana Fever on June 24, 2026, after the fist to the throat, the one-game suspension, the national outrage, the press conferences, and the coach who stood at a podium and described what he saw as not a thorough investigation, Alyssa Thomas sat with the questions being directed at her and the reality of what her career looks like right now. And the picture that emerged is far more complicated than a single suspension can capture. Because here is what most people watching the replay of that play do not know. The player whose fist made contact with Caitlin Clark's throat on national television plays professional basketball with torn labrums in both of her shoulders. Not one, both, simultaneously. She has not been able to lift her arms and shoot a traditional jump shot in years. The structural integrity of both shoulder joints is so compromised that she has adapted her entire offensive game to work around it, using a stiff one-handed pushing motion from her chest just to get the ball to the rim. She drives directly into the teeth of opposing defenses because she has no other choice. She scores in the paint because the mid-range pull-up, the jumper off a curl, the standard shot selection of a wing player, none of those options exist for her anymore. That is who was involved on June 24th. Not a reckless player in her prime making a careless decision. A 13-year veteran with torn labrums in both shoulders, who just served the first suspension of her entire career, whose body has been operating far outside of what most players would be able to tolerate, and who now faces the biggest questions about her career future that she has ever had to confront publicly. To understand the full weight of what happened and what it means going forward, you have to understand who Alyssa Thomas actually is. Because the casual sports fan who saw her name attached to a viral clip on social media this week may not have the full picture. Thomas was drafted 4th overall in the 2014 WNBA draft out of the University of Maryland, where she averaged 16.4 points and 10 rebounds per game across 4 seasons. She arrived in Connecticut as a versatile physical forward who could do multiple things that coaches spend years trying to teach players. She could post up, she could facilitate in the short roll, she could guard multiple positions. She was the kind of player whose impact on a possession showed up in ways that the stat line only partially captured. Over the next decade, she became one of the most respected players in the league among people who understand the game at its deepest level. 6 All-Star selection, an MVP candidacy in 2025, 11 years of consistent production for the Connecticut Sun before joining Phoenix as the most decorated free agent acquisition of that offseason. She is also currently 2nd in the entire league in assists per game in 2026, despite playing through an injury condition that most professional athletes at any level would have used as justification to stop competing years ago. The torn labrums are not new. They have been there for a long time. Players, coaches, and team medical staffs have been aware of her condition and the physical adaptations she has made to keep playing. She has gone without surgery. She has adjusted everything about her offensive approach. She has kept playing because she is, by all available accounts, someone whose competitive drive does not include the option of stepping away until there is literally no other choice, which is exactly what makes the questions being raised right now so significant. Not just for the incident with Clark, but for everything it implies about where Alyssa Thomas is as an athlete and what her career looks like from this point forward. The Mercury went into the 2026 season with significant expectations. They reached the WNBA Finals in 2025 and entered this year with the core largely intact, positioning themselves as one of the teams with a legitimate shot at the championship. Thomas was central to that calculation. She is the engine of everything Phoenix does on offense. Her ability to facilitate out of the high post and short roll, to read defenses and find open teammates, and to create interior advantages through sheer physicality makes her irreplaceable in that system. But the Mercury sit at 6 wins and 13 losses through mid-season. The expectations have not met the reality, and Thomas, playing through a condition that compounds with every season, has been a significant part of the conversation about why. Now she carries a suspension into that already complicated picture. And the conversation that followed in the days after the league announced its decision was not simply about whether one game was the right punishment. It was about what the incident revealed about the broader pattern, about whether a player whose physical pain has shaped her entire approach to the game has reached a point where that approach is generating consequences that extend beyond her own team. Phoenix coach Nate Tibbetts defended Thomas aggressively at his press conference on Saturday. He opened his remarks by telling the Mercury organization that Thomas was 100% supported. He said the people in the league know who AT is, that she is a competitor and a winner and tough, and that the one thing she is not is cheap. He challenged the process the WNBA used to reach the suspension, calling it not thorough and extremely disappointing. He said the people involved in the play were not questioned at all, a direct shot at the league's investigation procedure that went on the record as one of the most pointed critiques of WNBA management in recent memory. What Tibbetts was protecting, beyond his player, was a reputation. 13 years of professional basketball, a body of work built on physical toughness and competitive integrity in a sport that does not hand out either cheaply. The framing of Alyssa Thomas as a dirty player, as someone who deliberately tries to injure opponents, is one that people inside the league reject consistently. The framing of what happened with Clark as part of a pattern of targeted violence is one that people inside the league dispute consistently, and yet the clip existed, the suspension existed, and the public conversation moved in the direction it always moves when Caitlin Clark is at the center of something. Fever coach Stephanie White was just as direct on the other side. "Two cheap shots," she said after the game. "Egregious. Absolutely unacceptable." She talked about the fist in the throat being crazy and dangerous. She referenced the fact that the league had spent the entire offseason looking at officiating, and she was still standing at that podium asking the same questions she had been asking for 3 seasons. She called for consistency. She called for her player to be protected the same way every other player in the league is protected. She did not name Thomas specifically as someone with bad intentions, but she did not need to. The images were already everywhere. What lands in the middle of all of that is the reality of Alyssa Thomas's situation. A player in the final stage of a remarkable career, competing at a high level through physical damage that most people would find difficult to comprehend, navigating a reputation that has now been complicated by a moment that the entire sports world saw. The suspension is the smallest part of it. One game against the Toronto Tempo, the Mercury lost. Thomas sat in street clothes. The Caitlin Clark story moved on to the next development by the time that game ended. The larger questions do not resolve in one afternoon. They are the questions that follow a player into every remaining season of a career. Can a veteran with torn labrums in both shoulders continue to play at the pace and physicality that defined her career without the physical consequences escalating? How many more seasons does someone in that condition have before the body stops cooperating regardless of the competitive drive? And after an incident that generated congressional criticism, an attorney general's statement, and national media coverage that framed her as the villain in the most watched controversy in WNBA history, what does Alyssa Thomas's legacy look like when the career is finally over? These are not comfortable questions. They are not the questions a 6-time All-Star who built her career on winning should be facing in June. But they are the questions that exist now because of what happened in Indianapolis on the night of June 24th and because of everything it pulled into the light. Alyssa Thomas will keep playing. She is not the kind of person who walks away from something because the conversation around her gets difficult. She has been playing through difficult for years. Her body has been difficult. Her team's season has been difficult. The league's position on the Clark situation has been difficult for everyone who wears a Phoenix uniform to accept. She will keep competing because that is all she has ever done, and it is the only language her career has ever spoken. But the first suspension in 13 years of professional basketball does not disappear from the conversation. The questions about what the torn labrums mean for her long-term health do not disappear from the conversation. And the image of Alyssa Thomas crouched over Caitlin Clark on the floor of Gainbridge Fieldhouse does not disappear from the conversation regardless of what anyone who was in that arena says they saw or didn't see. This is where careers get complicated. Not in the moments that are easy to explain, but in the ones where everything arrives at the same time. The physical wear, the competitive reputation, the legacy, and a single play seen by millions of people who made up their minds before the broadcast even moved to the next possession. Alyssa Thomas has spent 13 years building something in this league that deserved a better ending than the one June 24th handed her. Whether she gets a chance to write a different final chapter remains to be seen. Subscribe for more.